Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining today's webinar. I appreciate you taking the time out of your working days to join. And as usual, if you've got any questions, please leave them within the chat or comments box within your webinar screen, and I'll aim to cover them as we go through the webinar. Any that I don't get the chance to cover them, your account manager will get in touch with you shortly afterwards, just to ensure that everything's answered. So before we kick things off, I usually like to run through some housekeeping before kind of getting into the presentation. So first of all, I'd like to make sure that everyone is on the latest version of VC. So those of you that have not upgraded onto version 5, we now have a brand new interface within Virtual Cabinet. It looks brilliant, and we've received some excellent feedback from clients so far. So I'd highly recommend that you upgrade. So for those of you that haven't upgraded in a while, our support team can handle this for you. It's totally free to upgrade. Feel free to drop an email to support@virtualcabinet.com or contact your account manager, and then we can let support know for you. So there was a webinar that was recently done on the new interface, as well as our new Virtual Cabinet module, Get Busy. It was done by my colleague Ken Byrne and the global head of VC, David Owen. Which will be available on our YouTube channel in the coming days. We can arrange for that to be sent out. If you leave a little comment in the box your end, we can ensure that that gets sent to yourselves. So we won't be focusing on Get Busy today, but for those of you who would like to find out more about the system, please get in contact with your account manager or just leave a little comment in the box there and we'll get in touch. So my aim today will be to give you some useful information where you can begin to implement an archiving policy, retention schedule, however you'd like to call it. I'd also like to cover off, for those of you that already have the document retention module installed, and possibly give you some inspiration how you can further manage your documents using the module. As you'll be aware, you have your own regulatory bodies who dictate how long you should be keeping each document for. If you do have any specific questions around that, I'd recommend that you contact them directly. However, I will provide you with as many use cases as what we've done for other clients, how we've helped them manage their documents and implement their own archiving policy, and effectively make it an automated solution, which is the dream when it comes to archiving. So I know this can be quite an intimidating topic for those of you who have never set up an archiving policy before. Believe me, me and the other account managers probably have this conversation on a fortnightly basis, where in essence, a lot of people just don't really know where to start. So let's give you some useful tips on today's webinar, how you can get going with it. So these are the points that I'll be covering today. So the first area I wanted to cover was the current climate. Then we'll go into the industry regulations and legal obligations, how VC can help, the document lifecycle, how it all pieces together with your integration with VC, and also the IT benefits of an archiving policy. And at that point, we'll stop for questions. But feel free, as we're going through the webinar, ask the questions, and I'll aim to address them as we go. But if not, I'll cover them off at the end. So before I kick things off, I just want to run a quick poll just to see how you're managing your documents at the moment. So something's going to pop up on your screen in a minute. If you're able to answer the question, that certainly helps from my end. So you should see that on your screen now. Does your business have an archiving policy? I'll leave it up there for another 15 seconds. Brilliant. I think that's everyone. So 60% of you said yes, which is brilliant. 10% of you said it was in progress, and there's 30% that haven't got anything in place yet. So we'll hopefully bring some value to everyone who's answered that poll. But no, thanks very much for answering, guys. Really appreciate that. So I wanted to talk about the current climate. So your businesses were almost made overnight to transform the way they work, whether that was relying on existing software applications or adopting new ones to help you work more efficiently without being in the office and being able to work together, which I think a lot of us can agree in that we probably took it all for granted. So without mentioning the C word, I know that many of you would have been frustrated and had to adapt very quickly to an unforeseen situation. For those of you that created all your files electronically and saved them into one central system like VC, it wouldn't have come as such a shock for you when managing something like an archiving policy. But for those of you that maybe managed part of the process in paper, or it was an entirely paper-based process, it made it impossible for you to manage that process when working from home. And in a lot of cases, especially speaking with clients, that process just got pushed to one side for the year. So some of you may be saving files in multiple locations. That might be a Windows folder structure. You might be putting paper files within cabinets. You might have documents within virtual cabinet. Well, I certainly hope you got most of your documents in virtual cabinet. You may have a historic document management system where some documents are sitting there. But whether you had an archiving policy or not, or you've kept every document forever, all of us have an obligation to our relevant governing bodies and current legislation to ensure that documents are maintained correctly. So one of the biggest regulatory changes that sticks with me was GDPR. You probably remember from 2018 onward, you couldn't walk down the street without hearing something related to GDPR. It was everywhere. And the fines that it carries are a real concern for any business. So you've probably heard of the likes of things like British Airways getting fined 20 million for mishandling financial details of customers, or Ticketmaster, who were fined 1.25 million for pretty much the same thing. Well, when you think of those sorts of business, you think, well, that's nothing like mine. But you do have the likes of smaller businesses, for example, Hudson Bay Finance, who are actually enforced with a notice to failing to respond to a subject access request recently. So it's very real things that are going on around GDPR today. So I'm not going to discuss all the things relating to GDPR, because that's a separate webinar in itself, and it is already available on our YouTube channel if that is something of interest. But let's just focus on one of the points that will relate to your archiving and how you're managing your documents. So a subject access request is also known as the right of access, which you have 20 days usually to respond to. One of my clients recently got caught out with one of these. So they're a 50 user accountancy practice on the outskirts of Kent, and they had a subject access request from a client that they stopped representing. Well, within that time frame, they had to come up with all the documents. So they had documents in VC, they had documents in paper files, they had individual emails which were in people's accounts, they had documents that were sitting on people's desktops. So it was one person's job for the best part of 2 weeks to collate those documents and send it back. So it was a very kind of time-consuming exercise for the business. But can you honestly say that you're able to recover those documents in your business within a timely manner? Are you ensuring that you're managing your ex-clients and your prospects' data correctly? And the same with your historic documents for kind of live clients that you've got at the moment, and even staff records, people that may have left the business. These are all things that we should all be thinking about. So how does VC help out with this? So you may have seen in our marketing that it's the single source of truth for all your documents. We will always encourage our clients to save every document that's generated within your business within Virtual Cabinet. Of course, sometimes there's anomalies where you've got to save in other locations, but of course, the more you can save things within to one central point is going to be much easier to implement an archiving policy, and where we can begin to introduce retention rules. So we can improve security as well. So Virtual Cabinet is very secure in the way that you can kind of Chinese wall off the system in a way that certain people can see certain things, certain people have certain privileges within the system. And the same with the retention rules. We can ensure that they are administered by certain individuals in the business. No one can go in and interrupt with your retention schedule. And of course, this is something that we can continue to help you out with. So one of the biggest benefits is reducing the compliance and admin time. So a client of ours, they're a 100-user insolvency practice. They had quite a strict archiving procedure. They had it all on a spreadsheet, and it would spend over the period of a year, they worked out it would be the best part of 3.5 weeks with them meeting and the work that would be involved that would be spent on archiving. Well, effectively, we took their retention schedule and we implemented it within Virtual Cabinet. And that process now is an entirely automated solution. So, of course, they need to stay up to date with their retention schedule. But so long as that's being updated within Virtual Cabinet, they've got complete peace of mind that everything's going in the correct place. And, of course, they can ensure that those documents aren't being kept longer than they should. So you've got total control of the documents and the retention rules within Virtual Cabinet. So because VC, we can specify the different document types and the different business areas, we can apply certain rules to certain document types. For example, if it's a permanent document, it might not be included within the retention rules. If it's something like an anti-money laundering document, we might arrange for that after 5 years to be destroyed. And of course, the policies are bespoke to you. Another one is eliminating human error. So quite often, if we're speaking about archiving with a client, they may say, well, we'll ensure that these documents are deleted ourselves, or we're going to put it in an area and we'll make sure that these documents are deleted ourselves. Well, we'll then speak with that client in 6 months' time, or they'll get in touch a year later, for example. They might turn around and say that, well, they have turned around and said that, well, the documents haven't been deleted. You know, and it begins to take up space. You're keeping documentation longer than you should, and obviously you're not falling in line with the various legislation. So with VC, we can ensure that it's automated, it's all going on in the background. You're not relying so much on human error, which is no one's fault. We're all busy in our day-to-days. It's just there's other things that we should be thinking about as well. So simplify your filing. So when you're searching across your client's cabinet, do you need to see 15 years worth of data? Probably not. So we can begin to break that down. And also we're ensuring that you're up to date and you're complying with the various privacy laws. And we'll go into the server benefits and the IT benefit of documentation retention a little bit later on in the presentation. So some of you may have been clients for quite some time and you've acquired a lot of historic data throughout your business's lifetime. So when searching through your client's data, you've probably got a lot of data sitting there. If you're a new customer, you might have historic files that are sitting within a folder structure. Potentially can be imported into Virtual Cabinet and rules applied to them. But a lot of the time when you're thinking about archiving, you need to be thinking of the documents that are older than 3 and 5 years. So this is where we can begin to introduce some cabinets in kind of 4 steps. So you've got your live client cabinet that you've got at the moment. So this is the one where you're creating documents for your customers and you're saving it into Virtual Cabinet. It's more than likely going into your client's cabinet. Well, we can begin to break that down further by introducing a new cabinet. So we would call this one the semi-archive. So in this example, we would have the client's cabinet, which would have 1 to 2, 1 to 3 years of data. So that's usually off the back of feedback from our clients. They say, well, we don't really need to see a document any older than 3 years on a day-to-day. Anything older than that can go into the semi-archive. But bear in mind, it's customizable. You might want to see 1 to 4 years. So in this example, we're going to say 1 to 3 years in your client's cabinet. From 3 to 5 years, those documents would then be automatically moved into a semi-archive cabinet for you. So it breaks it down. There's less documents sitting within your client's cabinet, so there's less to search through. And you've got this new cabinet here ranging from 3 to 5 years, which you can then search across. Once it reaches that 5-year period, it's then going to go into the full archive. So the full archive, it's going to be all your archive documents where different rules can be applied to different documents. So you don't need to opt in for automatic destruction, but let's just say you do. We can begin to apply certain rules on particular documents and have them removed from Virtual Cabinet using the destruction method. Some people like to include another additional cabinet. It's entirely up to them. Most people would go through these options here, but with the to be deleted cabinet may be an option. So they want an extra layer where they're able to go in and intervene if they don't want that document to be destroyed. So they could go and make it part of their process on a quarterly basis. They can go and see that to be deleted cabinet or a monthly basis and then stop it being deleted beforehand. So other areas that you can be thinking of. So you're breaking that data down using the new cabinets, but also your prospects. How are you managing your prospects at the moment? Some of you may be using another piece of software, and we wouldn't aim to interrupt with that process if you're keeping your prospects documents there. And then when they become a client, you're saving the documents within Virtual Cabinet, and that works well for you, then we're not going to aim to interrupt that process. But if you're saving documents onto a folder or people are saving it onto their desktop, why not introduce a specific prospect cabinet? when you're collecting things like identification, save the documents there. At the point where they become a client, you can then re-index them into your live client cabinet. Well, how about if they don't become a client? Well, how long should we keep in those documents for? We can begin to implement something like a retention rule that after a certain period, those documents can then be removed. So the big one is your ex-clients. So normally this is, no matter what the industry, normally people can get quite comfortable around certain documents they can delete within VC for their ex-clients. So as an example, an accountant, after 7 years, you can then begin to remove those non-permanent documents. And this can all be led by your CRM, which I'll go into the integration shortly. But how are you managing your ex-clients at the moment? We can put them in a separate ex-client cabinet for you, where the retention rule can be applied and remove them at a later date. So we've also got the client rename as well. So this isn't so much an additional cabinet, but within your back office system, if there are any updates to the client, so whether it's a change of name, a change of business, or the business name, you can change the name within within your back office system. The documents are then updated within Virtual Cabinet. You're not needing to go into Virtual Cabinet and change it manually. You change it in your back office system, it's then updated within VC. So I just wanted to show a very quick screenshot. It's the Virtual Cabinet interface, and these are what the cabinets would effectively look like. So you're introducing your live cabinet, which is your one that you'd use on a day-to-day. You then have your archive cabinet. You've got your ex-clients cabinet here, and of course you've got your HR just there as well. So Virtual Cabinet is a full business solution. It's not just for your client's document. It can be for your own personal documents. It can be for things like the company's financials, and of course your HR documents as well. So if you're thinking about staff members that have left over the years, how are you managing that? How can you set a retention policy to remove those documents at a later date? These are all things that we can implement for you. So another area I wanted to cover are the integrations. So we build the retention module to suit your policy. So it can be your existing policy you've got at the moment. We can imitate that within Virtual Cabinet. We can create a new document retention policy for you. Great place to start is using those client semi-archive and your archive cabinets. But if you're using a system like Iris, for example, you would put ZZ within the client code, and that can then trigger a task within Virtual Cabinet where it grabs all of the documents, moves them from your live client cabinet and into your ex-client cabinet. So where a retention rule can then be applied, and then those documents could potentially be removed after that 7-year period. Or if it's something that you just want to move it into a different cabinet, you don't want the automatic destruction, still it's going into a correct area within Virtual Cabinet. So the name change we've pretty much already covered, but yeah, if you're changing the name within your back office system, whether it's Iris, whether it's anything, once that's then changed within VC, within your back office system is then updated within Virtual Cabinet. So the same with your cases in something like IPS as well. So when you're closing a case, that can then trigger a task within Virtual Cabinet to move that into a separate cabinet, and then the documents relating to that case, we can then apply rules and then remove them after a certain period. And the policies are extremely flexible. So I think that's one thing we can take away from today. Every business may archive documents slightly different. Whether you're a government agency, you're an IFA, you're an accountant, you're a technology company, we can build a retention policy that would suit your requirements. So you let us know how you'd want that built, how you want it structured. We can then apply that within Virtual Cabinet. So the retention policy, for those of you that are familiar with Virtual Cabinet, can be applied to any index field, any section, or any database entry. So that would be something like a back office system. And the same from something like a transaction date or a closed case date as well. So we've got examples where we had one of our larger American clients where they had a list of policies that had expired. They gave it to us on a spreadsheet. We were then able to go import that within Virtual Cabinet, or import but build the scripts to suit that, and then we could remove those automatically for them or move them into a separate area. In this case, they were removed. There are also cases where we've got a private banking client who'd have a piece of software that wasn't connected to the internet, and they had a very strict archiving procedure. The problem was that everything was a manual process, and it costed hundreds of man hours over the year. So when we were able to implement that within Virtual Cabinet, it was quite a substantial cost saving to then fix that. So that was slightly more complex, but we were able to effectively match that within the SQL database and then update the documents within Virtual Cabinet and put them into the correct area for all the closed accounts. So we do have an integration webinar on the 18th of May, which will be coming up, and more details will be sent out shortly. So there's other benefits to the document retention aside from your archiving and adhering to various legislation. So I'd say about 30% of the inquiries we receive will be to do with reducing space on your file store. So for any IT people on the call, they'll know exactly what I mean. All the documents you're creating within Virtual Cabinet eventually are going to start to take up space on your server. So how can you ensure that that's kept at a manageable level, or you're not going above a certain amount? So with the ex-clients, for example, when those documents are being destroyed from the system, it's saving space on your file store. And for those of you on the call that may be using something like a hosted desktop where you're paying for the amount of space that you use on a daily basis, or monthly basis, sorry, is a great way to stay on top of that and potentially have a cost saving there as well. So we can use different disks, or you can use different disks on your server for different cabinets. So you may have, for your archive cabinet, you may have a slower disk because this is a cabinet that wouldn't typically be searched across. And then for your client cabinet, the one that your active client that you're using on a day-to-day, you could put your fast disk. So performance is going to be much quicker. But as you're kind of breaking the documents down into the various cabinets, so if you're going client, semi-archive, and archive, your client cabinet, which may have the documents ranging from 1 to 3 years, there's a lot less documents there. So for those of you that just search for the client record and you might scan through the documents, there's going to be a lot less documents to look through. Performance will be much quicker because there's less search results to run through. So they're all things to be thinking about. So I wanted to run through some useful tips, which you may or may not know already, but yeah, I feel like I'll cover them anyway. So when you delete a document in Virtual Cabinet, you've got a couple of options. You have delete and you have destroy. If you delete the document, it's always recoverable. So you can go into your search results within Virtual Cabinet. You can select show deleted items, which is a tick box, and then it would just show you all the documents that have been deleted by all the users in the business. So until you destroy those documents, or a document gets destroyed, it's not saving space overall in Virtual Cabinet. And remember, with the archiving, we can automatically archive those documents for you, but you don't necessarily need to destroy them in the first instance. It's entirely up to you. Delete and destroy rights can be given to certain users within the business. So you may have a junior member of staff, you wouldn't want to give them destroy rights. You might want to give that to admin users. So this is completely bespoke to how you guys work. And the same for other privileges in VC. They can all be, certain users can do different things, which you probably know already. So the best way to start your archiving journey is to start with the date and begin to use the client, the semi-archive, and the archive, and start to look at things like removing your ex-client's data and close cases for the insolvency practitioners on the call. So archiving doesn't just help adhering with the legality and legislation, there's also a big IT benefit. And for those of you that want to find out more which documents you can keep, the HMRC provide a free compliance handbook on their website. And also your account manager is here to help to get you started. So I understand there's probably quite a bit of information to digest from the webinar, but we are here to help, and we can help guide you through your journey. So I'm going to stop for questions. There's a few that have been asked, but yeah, leave this with me for a minute. But if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them within the webinar screen now. And I'll work through some of the ones that have already been sent across. How can I find out who has delete and destroy rights? So long as you're an admin user, you can go into the admin tab within Virtual Cabinet and then select view users and do it from there. If you're still unsure or you're not an admin user but you want to find out, please contact our help desk or just drop a quick email to your account manager, or just leave a comment here and we can ensure that support get this looked at for you. Is there a cost associated with the document retention module? So yes, there is. There's a subscription cost associated with it. Is it possible to use VC archiving without destroying documents within VC? For sure. So what we find sometimes is that we'll implement the new cabinets. We've got your clients, the semi-archive, and your archive cabinet. And normally your archive cabinet will be the one that will begin to remove those documents that you don't need to delete, or your ex-clients, the documents that you know that you can delete. But you might think, well, we just want to ensure that our documents are being archived, and then we'll then look at that at a later date. So we can switch on the automatic destruction at a later date. And in some cases, your document retention policy may change. So you may have a good example, is that I had a client of mine where we were set up the archive and the semi-archive cabinets. They gave me a call 6 months later and they said, well, we know that we shouldn't be keeping our anti-money laundering documents any longer than 5 years. Can you update our retention schedule to reflect that? So then we were able to do that for them. Can someone call me about Get Busy? Yes, John, I can arrange for your account manager to get in touch after the call. We have a re-indexing script already for documents older than 7 years. Can we use document retention for our ex-client and possibly our prospects? Yes, most definitely, for sure. So we can then implement those new cabinets and then apply those rules. So when you're marking a client as an ex-client, within your database, virtual cabinet can grab those documents and move it to the correct location for you. Well, I wanted to just show the account management team here at Virtual Cabinet. We are here to help. You may have spoken to us before, but have no clue what we look like. Here's our details on screen. I will just leave that up there for I would say a couple of minutes, but about a minute. And then from there, if you need to note anything down, feel free to note that down. So I think that's all we have time for today, but thank you very much for joining the webinar. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen. A recording will be made available to you that you can give to various staff members that may not have been able to attend. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for your time and hope to hear from you guys soon.